Hey listeners, thanks for dropping in. I'm Christy.
And I'm Melissa, and this is Buried Motives, where we dig deep into the details of some of the most gruesome
dirtbag murderers.
Hey listeners,
Welcome back to Buried Motives.
we're so glad you're joining us this week.
We are. It is cold here in Canada. It is December 1st, but you listeners warm our hearts.
Absolutely. And if we warm yours, you could give us a review.
That was pretty smooth, Melissa. I love it. But I agree. It's been a while since we've asked, so if you are enjoying our podcast, we would super appreciate it if you were able to take the time to give us a rating and an honest review of our podcast.
We would really appreciate it if you did. That way we can keep taking you on wild rides about these true crime stories.
For sure. It does help our podcast more than you realize.
And Chrissy's got another crazy story for us today.
I do.
She's only told me that it's a family annihilation and nothing else. And you know how much I love family annihilations, so I'll try to keep my guessing to myself.
Well, actually, I don't want you to keep your guessing to yourself this time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I'm going to get into that with you. But I do want to just warn our listeners that we are recording at night. And if any of you know us, sometimes we can get a little giddy at night. So hopefully we'll be able to keep this one under wraps and stay focused.
No tangents this time.
We'll see. No guarantees. Today, we are going to be taking another trip across the pond, and we're going to be visiting the UK.
It's a great place to visit.
Hopefully we can actually go in person one day. We're going to England, and this case is widely known in the UK, but surprisingly, it isn't talked about much in North America. Like Melissa said, I haven't told her even who we're going to be discussing today. I didn't even give her a name. This case has a lot of controversy over who the real dirtbag is. And as we all know, Melissa likes to figure out the case right away. So I thought it would be fun for her to figure it out along the way with our listeners and see if she thinks the right person was blamed for the grisly crime.
Oh, I'm actually excited about this.
I knew you would be.
This is one case that I don't have to be like, what?
Where it's okay if you ask a lot of questions. Not necessarily that I'm going to spill the beans right away, but I want you to try and figure out if they got the right person.
Okay, so I can speculate away.
Absolutely. And I must admit that at times while researching this case, I felt like police 100% got it right, despite their less than stellar conduct. But then, once in a while, I caught myself second guessing. The details of this case seem to be more like something out of a fictional crime novel, despite being one of England's worst family annihilations. This is the case of the White House Farm murders. However, we are going to start our case with a love story.
That's how all family annihilations start.
Yes. Ralph Neville Bamber was born in 1924 in Surrey, England. His father was born in India, and his mother was born in Greater London, England. Ralph went by his middle name, Neville, so that is how I will refer to him. Neville had only one sister, but she passed away in 1949 at the age of 26. I never found any information supporting his sister having any children before she died, so this suggests that Neville came from a very small family. One day, Neville met the woman of his dreams, June Speakman. June was born in Essex, England, also in 1924. June was a very religious woman and much quieter than Neville. She worked as a secretary at the time, and that is reportedly how they met. The pair were married in 1949 at the age of 25 and were eager to start a family. Neville became an RAF, or Royal Air Force pilot, and magistrate at Witham Magistrates Court. He was a tall man at 6'4" and was in good physical health.
That is super tall.
Yeah, and he was fairly well built, a detail that will be important later. He was described by many as a good and fair man. The year they were married, the couple moved onto 300 acres, or 121 hectares, of farmland in Tolshunt, Darcy, on Pages Lane, 19 kilometers, or 12 miles from Colchester, England, or an hour-and-a-half drive northeast of London. The property, White House Farm, had belonged to June's father. There was a beautiful Georgian red brick house nestled on the property that the couple made their home. Neville would make a living farming this majestic land, as well as run a caravan park at O'C Road, which is like a campground. Both things he was very successful at, and the couple became quite wealthy. The only thing that was missing from their picture-perfect scene was fulfilling their wish to expand their family and have children. After 8 years of marriage, Neville and June decided to adopt a child. In 1957, they adopted a baby girl named Sheila Jean Bamber. She was born on July 18, 1957. 4 years later, they would adopt a baby boy. He was born on January 13, 1961, in London, England. He was born to Juliet Dorothy Wheeler. She was a vicar's daughter and had become pregnant through an affair with a man named Leslie Bryan Marsham, who was a British Army Sergeant Major that worked at Buckingham Palace as a controller. The boy was named Jeremy Paul Marsham before being placed for adoption. This would have been a big scandal at the time, and I assume that Juliet didn't have a lot of options other than to place her son to be adopted.
Right. She might have even been forced to do it.
That crossed my mind as well. I wouldn't be surprised. Neville and June adopted Jeremy when he was 6 months old from the Church of England Children's Society and kept his first name Jeremy, but changed the rest of his name to Jeremy Neville Bamber. And a fun fact, Jeremy's biological parents would find out from reporters what happened to their son later in life. By that time, they were married to each other, and both were working for Buckingham Palace under the charge of Queen Elizabeth II.
Oh, that is interesting. Man, that Scratch is suspect one, though. I thought the dad was going to come back and claim his son.
No, that doesn't happen.
Okay.
June and Neville were able to provide a good home for their 2 children. However, in the 50s, when the kids were young, June started to suffer from major depression. She was admitted into a psychiatric hospital on more than one occasion and had been administered electroshock therapy at least 6 times.
It is crazy to learn about the treatments that they did for depression back in the 50s.
Oh yeah, it's scary.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this was pretty common practice for the time. The idea behind this therapy is that small electric currents are passed through the brain, intentionally triggering a brief seizure, causing changes in brain chemistry that can quickly reverse symptoms of certain mental health conditions.
They actually still do it today.
I know. It is still used as treatment in certain circumstances, but it's no longer a mainstream practice like it was in the 50s.
That's right. It's used for really specific cases.
That needs some pretty severe treatment, I would assume.
Yeah, it's ones that usually haven't responded to any other sort of treatment.
Right. Like a last effort. Despite June's mental health challenges, they were able to care for their children well. The kids didn't want for much. Both kids were given a private education. Because of June's strong religious convictions, they did raise the 2 children stricter than what others might have. June had certain values and standards that she wanted upheld. Was she extreme? The jury is out on that. Some sources say yes, while some didn't really indicate that to be the case.
Okay.
So I found conflicting reports on how extreme she was with her religious beliefs.
Along with her depression, though, a lot of the times you can have a perfectionist personality that really does demand a lot from other people around you, as well as yourself.
And I could see that to be true, to be honest. I think her intentions were good. And her conviction in her religion was very strong. So you mix it all together and that's what you get.
Yeah.
June and Neville's daughter, Sheila, grew to be a gorgeous woman. Absolutely stunning. She attended private boarding school and had the whole world ahead of her. At age 17, Sheila became pregnant. Being devout Christians, June and Neville were not pleased to learn of this news. Despite it going against their beliefs, they arranged for Sheila to have an abortion.
Oh, that is shocking.
It really is. But it's not unheard of.
No.
Often, sometimes you hear of this happening where that's totally against their beliefs, but when it happens to them, they let it slide.
And was it because of shame?
Probably.
Yeah.
Sheila's and June's relationship took an unfortunate turn after this happened. June was extremely upset that her daughter wasn't upholding the standards that she had put in place for her. On one occasion, June caught Sheila sunbathing naked with her boyfriend Colin, the same boy who she had become pregnant with. I read in one account that Sheila had been expelled from school twice, so she must have had a bit of a rebellious streak in her.
So he wasn't kicked to the curb after he got her pregnant?
No, she kept seeing him.
Wow.
June started calling Sheila the devil's child. She expressed concern that Sheila must have been possessed by the devil to behave in such a way. And I wrote, yikes.
Yeah, that stuff happens actually.
Yeah, and it's scary when it does.
Mm-hmm.
But to June, this was the only way to explain away her daughter's poor decisions, in her opinion.
I could see that. Sometimes as a parent, you're just looking for an excuse.
As some kind of scapegoat, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not me, it's the devil.
That's right.
I wasn't a bad mom, it's the devil. Not that I'm calling June a bad mom, I'm not.
No.
Sheila did go on to secretarial school and started to do some modeling. I wasn't surprised when I read about her doing modeling. When I saw a picture of her, I thought, oh man, she could be a model. And her modeling nickname was Bambi, which I loved. She's honestly so gorgeous. She's just got these big doe eyes.
Just modeling though, right?
Just modeling.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing scandalous there.
Okay.
Sheila married her teenage sweetheart, Colin Caffel, in 1977 and gave birth to twin boys, Daniel and Nicholas Caffel, on June 22nd, 1979. And I did read in one account that she had had a miscarriage in there as well. Sadly, Sheila followed in her mother's footsteps and started to develop mental health concerns. Was this just misdiagnosed postpartum depression for both of them? And yes, adoptive parents can experience postpartum depression.
Oh, absolutely.
But it made me think of that because June experienced depression after they adopted their two children, and Sheila, after having her twins, started to become more depressed. But I just don't think there was a lot of knowledge about postpartum depression in the 70s even.
It's true.
A psychiatrist, Hugh Ferguson, who had treated June at one time, also went on to treat Sheila as well.
She didn't have to go through electric shock therapy, though.
No, she didn't.
There was a big difference between treatments in the 50s to the 70s.
Yeah, I never actually came across any electroshock therapy for Sheila. She was given more medications and things like that to manage her symptoms. Sheila was diagnosed with schizoaffective disease and paranoid schizophrenia and stayed on track with her mother when she started calling her sons devil children. There was one psychiatrist report that stated that Sheila believed her children were from the devil. This put strain on Sheila and Colin's relationship, and eventually, in 1982, their marriage ended.
Who kept the kids?
They both do, but Colin has
more.
them more often.
Okay.
Yeah. The boys would have been around the age of 3 at the time. And like I said, from what I understood, she did share custody of her boys with Colin, although he did have them more often. Her parents paid for a fancy flat in London for her to reside in. And she would sometimes stay at White House Farm with her parents. So they were supportive.
Well, you think her mom would be super supportive because she would have an understanding of what she was going through.
Mm-hmm. But this also would have been kind of scandalous for her mother that her daughter had been divorced.
That's true. Especially for someone who we're assuming might have been a perfectionist.
Right. So they actually were really good to Sheila after the divorce.
Okay.
And through the marriage, not just after, but they did support Sheila through the divorce. In 1985, Sheila experienced what was described as a psychotic episode and was sent to a mental health facility for treatment. It was said that she believed she could communicate with God and that people were trying to kill her. I think that schizophrenia might have been used as a blanket diagnosis during that time before more was known about mental health. That being said, if Sheila did in fact have schizoaffective disease, it is a mental disorder in which a person experiences a combination of symptoms of schizophrenia and mood disorder. Healthcare professionals recommend urgent medical attention when you have it, and it can be considered dangerous or life-threatening if untreated.
Is she the one that kills or is she the one that gets killed?
Well, you don't know yet.
Come on,
That's why I
Christy.
said dun dun dun. Jeremy attended St. Nicholas Primary School and then went to a private prep school, Malden Court. In the fall of 1970, his parents sent him to Gresham's boarding school in Holt, Norfolk, followed by college in Colchester. Jeremy left college, which is kind of like our high school from what I understand, in 1978 without any real qualifications. He didn't do well in school at all. He used his good looks and charms to hook up and have a little too much fun instead of studying like he should have. He was described as a materialistic playboy. His parents found out he had relations with both men and women and did not approve, to say the least.
Oh, that would have not gone over well with June.
No. It was said that Jeremy felt rejected by his parents when they sent him away to school. So perhaps his rebellion was his way of protesting or getting back at them.
I could see that.
Or even just for their attention.
Right.
Neville and June decided to fund a trip to Australia and New Zealand for Jeremy after he finished school in hopes that he would find himself.
Yeah, because that's what you do when a kid has been rebellious. You reward them with a trip around the world.
Exactly. However, the only thing Jeremy found was trouble.
And were they shocked by that?
I don't know. Probably not, unfortunately.
Here, let us fund your fun.
Yeah. I want to misbehave and have someone send me to Australia and New Zealand to find myself and smarten up.
Yeah, me too.
Any takers out there? Melissa and I need to be punished and sent to Australia. His original goal in going to Australia and New Zealand was to learn how to scuba dive. But instead, he got caught breaking into a jewelry store and stealing 2 very expensive watches, one of which he gave to a girl he was dating there. Some sources claim that he also smuggled heroin overseas and finally fled New Zealand when his friend was involved in an armed robbery.
He is really straightening his life out over there.
And not too concerned about it because he reportedly later bragged about the trouble he got into during his extended trip.
Oh, man. Those poor parents. Here they are thinking that they're doing something that's going to be beneficial for his future, and he's just totally abusing it.
Right. All they've wanted is a family, and they've given their children a leg up in the world and every privilege that they can, and it's not turning out the way that they had hoped. Once back in England, Jeremy worked in a restaurant called Little Chef. He held down a few brief jobs, but eventually ended up working at the farm for his parents.
And did he actually work, or did they just put him on the payroll?
I think he actually worked.
Okay. Maybe I'm too judgmental of him.
Well, hang on to that thought.
Okay.
Jeremy did work, but he complained that he wanted to be paid more money for working at White House Farm. But he didn't take into account that along with a paycheck, his parents paid for the house he was living in and bought him a car to drive.
Okay.
Poor boy, right?
Yeah.
We feel really sorry for him. His rent-free cottage was at 9 Head Street in Goldhanger. It was only 5.6 kilometers, or 3.5 miles, away from his family's farmhouse. So he had a really quick commute to work. Jeremy's girlfriend, Julie Mugford, lived with him in this free cottage as well.
Was she the one that he stole the watch for?
No, that was a girl who lived in Australia.
Okay.
Or New Zealand. I can't remember which one
Okay.
it was.
So he didn't bring that girl home with him.
No. But this was a steady girlfriend of his at the time.
Okay.
And from what I understood, it seemed like she stayed there often, but maybe not all of the time.
Not quite live in.
Mm-hmm. Kind of live in.
It's hard to be a playboy when you have a live-in.
Well, and Jeremy still behaved like a playboy. Girls flocked to him because of his good looks and charm.
And his parents' money.
Yeah, that wouldn't hurt the situation either, I would assume. Along with this, Neville and June also gave Jeremy 80% ownership of the family's caravan or camping site business. His loving parents were trying to set him up for success, but he was too spoiled and greedy to appreciate what he was given. So much so that he even staged a break-in at the campground by trashing the place and stealing money from the company. He later claimed that he only did that to prove to his parents that they needed to up the security there.
What?
Yeah.
Not to take the money that he stole.
Right. So
Yeah.
totally acting like a spoiled little rich kid.
Yeah. Interestingly, I just listened to this whole podcast about permissive parenting and the follies of it. Not something you want to do.
So far, I have described to you a mentally unstable daughter who began taking her religious beliefs to the extreme, and a greedy, resentful, reckless son. Keep this in mind as I begin to tell you about the horrific crime that would ultimately befall the Bamber family.
Really, right now, I'm just feeling sorry for Neville.
Yeah, Neville was a good guy. He really was. Nobody had anything bad to ever say about Neville.
He had a difficult time with his wife, got her through all of her mental health issues and her religious things. And then his daughter takes ill with mental health issues, gets a divorce. He's looking after her, and then he still has to take care of this bum of a son that is actually stealing from him.
Yeah, really. Let's take a moment to feel sorry for Neville.
He's not going to be the murderer, is he? Yes, he is, because he's big and strong.
I did say that would come into account later. 6'4". That's pretty tall. That's a big man.
That's a man you call sir.
On August 6, 1985, Sheila brought her 2, now 6-year-old boys to visit her parents and brother. She had made plans to spend the whole week at White House Farm while she had her sons with her. Jeremy came to the house to visit and have dinner as well. Staff at the house said no one had acted weird. Sheila was reportedly in a good mood and seemed really happy. On August 7th, 1985, at 3:26 a.m., Jeremy placed a call to the local police station. He didn't call 999, which is our 911. Instead, he took the time to look up the non-emergency number. When police answered, he told them that he had just received a phone call from his father stating, quote, "You've got to help me. Please come over. Your sister has gone crazy and has got the gun." He said that after that, the line went dead. Jeremy told police that his sister had a history with mental illness and that his father did keep guns in the house. Interestingly, before calling the police, Jeremy called his girlfriend Julie. Not knowing what they would be in for, before heading to White House Farm, police gathered a team to investigate. They also asked Jeremy to meet them at the house.
But wasn't he already there?
No, because he lives 3.5 miles away.
But he went over for dinner.
He did, but this was 3:26 in the morning. He had reportedly gone home around 10 o'clock that evening to his own house. Okay. And he had said he was in bed by 11 and then had been woken up at 3:26 in the morning when his father called.
Okay. There's no buddy is trying to sell off the farm for their retirement or get rid of all the stuff.
No, not like our Thanksgiving case.
Okay.
No.
Nobody's setting anybody up to have to live on their own.
No, this seems totally unprovoked.
Okay.
Yeah. At the time, Neville and June were paying for both of their children's homes.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. If they're the ones that are going to end up dead, I want to know, were they thinking that it was time that their children tow their own weight?
No, not at all. They were happy to keep taking care of their children. And were doing it generously.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like it.
Yeah, Jeremy had a whole cottage, and Sheila had a beautiful flat in London. Police were surprised when they approached the home and saw that Jeremy was still driving towards the house. They knew he only lived 3.5 miles away and should have gotten to his parents' property well before they did. Officers commented that it was odd how slowly they saw Jeremy driving. He was actually known for driving fast. And if you thought your sister had gone crazy with a gun and your father had called you for help, wouldn't you have gotten there as fast as you could?
Yeah, it's almost like he's stalling because he doesn't want to go into what he thinks is going to be there or
Right.
what he knows is going to be there.
Right. And I felt like it was almost as if he wanted to make sure that the police saw him traveling there and see that he wasn't already at the house. When Jeremy greeted the police at his family's farm, he immediately began telling them about what a nut job his sister was. His word, not mine. Police didn't enter the house right away.
What?
It's true. The police conduct in this case is actually appalling.
Okay.
It's very frustrating.
But for some reason, they didn't enter the house right away.
Right, and I'll tell you why. They did know that there were 5 people inside the house. 61-year-old Neville Bamber, 61-year-old June Bamber, 28-year-old Sheila Caffel, and 6-year-old twin boys Daniel and Nicholas Caffel. An officer thought that they spotted someone in the window moving inside the house, and so they decided to wait for the tactical firearms unit to arrive in order to proceed safely. They wouldn't enter the Bamber home until 7:45 a.m., over 4 hours after Jeremy had called them.
4 hours later.
Yeah, after he had called to say that his family was in danger. The only sound they could hear coming from the house was a dog barking. That kind of blew my mind. 4 hours they sat outside the house.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And they weren't sneaking up, looking in through windows, trying to assess the situation?
They had kind of checked the outside, but they just had decided not to enter. One officer thought he saw someone in the window upstairs, so they were going to wait for the firearm team.
Okay. Which I understand to a certain point.
But 4 hours?
But 4 hours is super excessive.
Yeah. And by 4 hours, if anyone was alive in the house, are they still going to be 4 hours later?
Yeah, not if they're injured.
No. Police first discovered Neville. He was laying in the kitchen. He had been shot 8 times. The kitchen had been in disarray, suggesting that Neville had put up a fight against his attacker. Upstairs, police discovered June. She was laying on the floor of the main bedroom and had been shot 7 times. Sheila was also found dead in that room, not far from her mother. She was laying on her back. She had been shot twice in the throat. On her chest laid a .22 caliber Anshet's automatic rifle. Her finger still on the trigger, and a Bible was on the floor close to her. The twins were both found dead in their beds. They had both been shot. One of the boys was found still sucking his thumb.
No way.
indicating that they were asleep when the grisly attack happened.
At least that's something.
Mm-hmm.
So were they shot first then, do they think?
I will go into the shootings a little bit more in detail
Okay.
in a little bit, but there was no way to know who had been shot first.
Okay. And Sheila had 2 shots to her neck
Yes.
from an automatic weapon.
Yeah, from a 22 caliber rifle.
Is it automatic?
Automatic rifle, yeah.
Okay.
It seemed to police that this was an obvious murder-suicide case. Some officers commented later that Jeremy's demeanor was odd when they discovered the bodies of each one of his family members. He didn't appear to show any emotion. Others coddled him and offered him some tea and believed every word that he was telling them about his deranged sister. The lead officer decided that Sheila had killed her parents and her 2 children and then turned the gun on herself. She was just a paranoid, crazy woman who had recently been diagnosed and treated for schizophrenia. The seasoned officers agreed with his assessment of the situation. However, younger, more eager officers felt like things were not quite adding up.
Okay. Now you have to tell me all the evidence.
I will. But before I do, because of this early assumption, the White House farm investigation was not handled in the way that it should have been.
Oh, that's
Mhm.
always so frustrating when there's assumptions made right at the very beginning. And so then they don't do a proper investigation because of their assumptions.
Yeah, and that is exactly what happens in this case. And it was all the more seasoned officers who felt this way. So the younger ones who were questioning didn't feel like they had enough weight behind them to be able to investigate the way that they wanted.
That's frustrating.
Mm-hmm. The crime scene was not preserved properly. For example, the officer who handled the murder weapon didn't even wear gloves.
What?
Yeah. And investigators were able to just walk freely around the home in their boots.
No way.
And this is 1980s. They know better by now.
Absolutely, they know better.
Mm-hmm. There are a lot of details to go over, and I hope that I can do it justice. I was just saying to Melissa that my brain is so full of details right now. We will revisit the crime scene and evidence. But first, let's discuss what happened after the bodies were found. So we'll come back to this.
Okay.
The news of this horrific 3-generation massacre hit the news fast. The media ate up the story that a washed-up model with psychiatric illnesses had savagely murdered her parents and children.
Of course it would.
Because the killings were such big news, the funeral was allowed to be televised.
Really?
Except for the funeral of Nicholas and Daniel. Their funeral arrangements were left to their father, Colin. But so for his parents and sister, that was all televised.
But Jeremy would have had to say that was okay.
Mm-hmm.
And he did.
He did.
Because he got money for it?
No, but what I'm about to tell you might be the reason why.
Okay.
During the funeral, Jeremy was seen putting on quite the performance. His living girlfriend, Julie Mugford, attended the funeral with him. Jeremy appeared to be so grief-stricken that he could hardly walk at times. He would fall to the ground and howl in pain. Interestingly, people stated that when the cameras were off, he acted just fine. And when they were turned back on, he would become overly distraught again. It was as if his demeanor would change. Julie later stated that although Jeremy was crying out in pain, he didn't actually shed any tears.
Super fishy.
Mm-hmm. But doesn't prove that he's guilty.
Okay. Usually means that something's up, though.
Mm-hmm. Well, it made me think of the Whitehead twins who had murdered their mom, who were carrying on and crying and not shedding any tears.
Mm-hmm.
And you can watch the video of him during the funeral online. If you just search it on YouTube, you will be able to find it. I watched a video where an expert analyzed his facial expressions during the funeral, and it was so fascinating. During CrimeCon last year, I learned about how you can tell if someone is being truthful or not just by observing their facial expressions and body movements.
Oh, yeah, that's the whole, if they look to the left and up, then they're thinking
Yeah.
of something to lie about or something like that, right?
Exactly. Susan Constantine did a session called How to Spot a Liar in 7 Seconds or Less. There are definite unconscious tells to help experts determine if someone's statements or actions are genuine. The expert that analyzed Jeremy did not believe that he was feeling real sadness during the funeral. It's a science that I find so incredibly interesting. One example of this with Jeremy was the way he was frowning. Genuine frowning while crying uses certain muscles in your face. Jeremy was using more of his chin muscles to frown, producing more of a pout than a genuine frown.
Because your face wouldn't be naturally relaxed.
Yeah, it was more like the side muscles of your
forced,
face
yeah.
will pull down your frown, where it was more his chin was lifting up his lower lip.
And it was forcing it.
Right. So like a little kid when they don't get their way and they pout
Yeah.
and put that lip out, that's more what his face looked like at times.
Okay.
And he went into more details. He talked about the eyebrows and just all these different things.
Yeah.
One expert's opinion, but I ate it up because I think there is a whole science to that. Colin, Sheila's ex-husband and father of the twins, said that he noticed Jeremy's demeanor changing when the cameras were on versus when they were off. He said that once the cameras were off, quote, Jeremy started cracking jokes and laughing about how he couldn't wait to get back to the house with Julie, his then girlfriend, and have some fun.
What?
This is what he's saying.
Okay.
During the funeral.
And prior to the funeral, did anybody ever have any suspicions of Jeremy killing anybody?
No.
So the funeral is their first time having any suspicions like, this is not right. Something is odd about this.
Right. And the people who are just watching this on TV would just feel so bad for Jeremy because
Right.
they're just seeing this totally distraught man who can hardly walk. And who can blame him? Because his whole family's just been annihilated.
But the people at the funeral are raising eyebrows about his performance.
Correct.
Okay.
With both of his parents deceased, Jeremy inherited everything they had. Because his sister was also dead, he no longer had to split it 50-50 with her. The estate alone was worth £500,000. Today, that is just over 1.5 million Canadian dollars.
But it sounds like his parents were already giving him anything that he wanted anyway.
But we're making him work at the farm.
Right.
Jeremy started to sell some of his family's items, including some of his father's vehicles. He allegedly used some of the money to purchase drugs.
Oh.
Another action of Jeremy's that didn't really spell out, I'm devastated that my entire family has been murdered.
So much that I'm falling over at their
Right.
funeral.
Exactly. Was when he discovered nude photographs of his sister and offered the Sun tabloid first dibs at purchasing the photos from him.
No, he did not.
Dirtbag move.
That is awful.
It's gross. For a brother to do that to his sister who's deceased?
Yeah, that's wrong.
Yeah. The Sun declined, which I thought, good for you, Sun tabloid of England.
Yeah.
Instead, they published the news that Jeremy had approached them trying to sell the topless or nude photographs of his dead sister who murdered his parents and nephews.
So they still got their story out. They just didn't have to pay anybody for it.
And touche on their part. I love that. Like,
Yeah.
No, dirtbag, we don't want your dead sister's nude photos, but we're going to let the world know what a creep you are. I feel like that was their reward. They should have got the story.
Good job.
Yeah. Because not every tabloid would have had the same honor. They would have taken them and run.
Yeah,
don't
I
you
think you're right about that.
Yeah. In a surprising twist of events, Jeremy's girlfriend, Julie, decided she could no longer live with the guilt she was feeling and went to police to tell them what she knew. Apparently, the two had broken up over another woman. Some people think that Julie was just a jilted ex-girlfriend and said the things that she did to get revenge on Jeremy. And you can tell me what you think. There's so many what-ifs and questions about this case.
Okay.
And this is where I say it's kind of like a fictional crime novel because it kind of keeps you guessing. Julie claimed that she had been asking her boyfriend of 2 years repeatedly about her concerns regarding his family's murders. She said he kept getting upset with her for asking. Finally, while at his dead sister's apartment, an ex of his called and he made arrangements to meet up with this woman right in front of Julie. In his anger, he twisted her arm up behind her back, and this was the final last straw for her.
Okay, sorry. Why was he angry at her?
Because she was on his case about it. She kept questioning about the murders, and then his ex-girlfriend called at the apartment of Sheila's,
Yeah.
and she got upset that he had made basically a date with this woman, and he got mad and twisted her arm behind her.
Okay.
And then she's like, we're done.
There was this altercation after the phone call.
Correct. And it was after this altercation and their breakup that she came forward and went to the police.
So it sounds a little bit vindictive, but you still have to have some facts to support your vindictiveness with.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. We don't know for sure, are these facts or not. 4 days after the attack, Julie told police that Jeremy had started talking about murdering his entire family long before they were all murdered, like 18 months prior. She claimed that he originally was wanting to poison everyone and then start the house on fire. Julie said she thought he was joking because he often said things simply for shock value. In addition, Julie said that Jeremy often spoke of all the money he was set to inherit one day. The night of the murder, Julie stated that Jeremy had phoned her and told her, quote, "It's tonight or never." After this little conversation with Julie, police decided that maybe they should finally arrest and bring in the only survivor of the Bamber family for questioning.
And this is like 2 years later?
No, this is just weeks later.
Okay.
The only thing Jeremy would give to the police was denials. He was arrested on September 8th and remained firm in his statement that he did not have anything to do with his family's deaths. He used his parents' money to hire the most top-notch lawyers that he could.
So they must have had a little bit of evidence to go on to straight up arrest him instead of bringing him in for questioning.
The research I found said that they arrested him and brought him in for questioning off of her testimony.
Interesting.
So he's arrested on September 8th, and he was let out on bail on September 13th. And on top of that, he was given permission to take a vacation to the south of France.
Sure, leave the country. You might be a murderer, but enjoy your vacation.
Right. You seem really stressed, sir. This must be hard on you. Go and live it up in south of France.
Okay.
I wrote, what? Like, that does not make sense to me.
Usually you have your passport removed.
Yeah, you were totally a flight risk, let alone them saying, yeah, go to France, have some fun.
They probably thought he was a super upstanding guy because he asked permission. Oh, by the way, I'm going to France. Is that okay with you guys?
Right. Maybe he started sobbing and falling on the ground.
Maybe.
I do want to note that Julie implicated herself in some crimes with Jeremy, like breaking into the family campground. Her crimes were pardoned in exchange for her testimony.
Okay.
There were some other things that she had on her record, like possession of marijuana and a few small petty theft things like that, and it was all expunged for her testimony. But this made some people question the validity of her statements.
That deal came about after she already went to the police and told them.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
She's already told the police her story, and then she finds a way to make it the most beneficial for her afterwards.
Or I don't know if she was like, I'm going to tell you some things and I don't want to be implicated when I do.
Okay.
I'm not sure exactly how that went down. When Jeremy returned from living it up in France with a buddy, he was promptly taken back in on September 29th for the 5 murders of his family members. Like they did during Jeremy's trial, let's go over some of the evidence in more detail. Sheila's psychiatrist stated that Sheila was schizophrenic and had stopped taking her medication. He also said that Sheila had told him prior to the murders that she wanted to kill her children. She called them devil children, just like her mother had called her. In addition, he claimed that Sheila had expressed her desire to kill her mother and struggled with suicidal ideation.
It's all believable.
Going into physical evidence, let's start with the crime scene in general. As I mentioned already, because the lead officer believed he had solved the case as soon as he pretty much had gotten there, it didn't seem like a thorough search of the home was conducted. He listened to what Jeremy had to say and made the pieces fit into the puzzle. At the request of Jeremy, police agreed to clean up the crime scene shortly after the murders occurred.
Oh, man.
3 days after the ordeal, the entire home was cleaned and blood evidence was burned, mainly the carpets and bloody bedding.
That has happened on other cases that we've covered too, which is so crazy.
It blows my mind. They took a few samples and then had the evidence destroyed. This is 5 murders. You don't just destroy evidence 3 days after? Blows my mind. The lead officer was so convinced that this was a murder-suicide that he reportedly went golfing afterwards, calling it a domestic. Jeremy's cousins came to the lead investigator, asking him to investigate Jeremy as a suspect, but they were allegedly asked to leave his office.
And when did his cousins go and ask the investigator that?
Soon after the murders had happened.
Before he went to France and before his girlfriend turned him in?
I believe so. Or it could have been happening around the same time. There wasn't a definite timeline of when they went, but soon in the investigation.
Okay.
Jeremy's clothing wasn't inspected until a month after the murders. The murder weapon was handled, like I said, without gloves and not fingerprinted for weeks. The bodies were allowed to be cremated, and more evidence was destroyed 10 years after the trial. They're like, let's clean up some evidence.
Okay.
What I get from this is that the crime scene wasn't really treated and processed like a crime scene at all, which is really unfortunate and leaves us with a lot of questions. Next, let's talk about the murder weapon, the gun. Neville had a large gun collection that he took very good care of. He always first cleaned and then put away any gun that he used. He never left them laying around the house.
Especially when you have 6-year-old twin grandsons that are going to come there and play for the weekend. You're not leaving guns around.
For sure you're not.
Yeah.
And Neville was super responsible with his guns.
I'm having a hard time believing anybody but dirtbag Jeremy committed this crime. But maybe you'll tell me something else that will change my mind.
We'll get into more details. Jeremy had claimed that he was the one who had taken out the .22 rifle that was used in the mass murder. He loaded it and was going to go out hunting rabbits, but then ended up not going.
At 10 o'clock at night?
No, this was during the day.
Okay.
He's like, yeah, I was going to go hunt rabbits. I took out the rifle, I loaded it, but then got busy, didn't end up going.
Okay.
He told the authorities right away that he had left the loaded gun sitting on the table with a box of bullets next to it. He was like, my sister is crazy, and I left a loaded gun inside the house, out in the open. And I have two beefs with this statement. First of all, who does that with two 6-year-olds, like you said, running around the house? And second, it doesn't seem likely that Neville would have let the loaded gun just sit on his kitchen table for the better part of a day unattended.
Right.
But I feel like Jeremy was trying to put these thoughts into the police officer's head. He's telling them right away, I touched the gun, I put it there, and I left it there. So there it was sitting in the open.
And that's why my fingerprints are all over everything.
Mm-hmm. An officer thought he saw someone in the window, like I said, after they arrived. And that was the reason they didn't enter the house immediately. Supposedly, they suspected that it must have been Sheila walking around upstairs.
Did they hear gunshots while they were there?
Nope, that was my next line. However, no gunshots were heard by the officers waiting outside. Like I said, the only thing they heard was a dog barking.
You're going to hear a shotgun.
Yep, especially twice.
Yep.
If she did shoot herself, they should have heard those two shots. A few days after the murder, one of Jeremy's cousins found a silencer put away in the gun cabinet. The silencer had blood on it. He said it was just a small sticky spot. He took it to the police, and the blood did match with Sheila's blood type. Or it could have been a mix of Neville's and June's blood together. Again, remember that Neville always cleaned his equipment after using it, and it seems unlikely to me that both of their blood would end up in the exact same spot on the silencer to mix together.
Yeah, that's hard to believe.
Seems fishy to me. The sample wasn't large enough at the time for a full analysis, but the blood type was able to be determined.
And the twin boys had different blood types.
It was not a match to the boys.
Okay.
A blood spatter expert concluded that the blood on the silencer was back spatter caused by a close contact shot. However, another expert claimed that back spatter would not be possible if the silencer was used. There was also a hair found stuck to the silencer, and red paint had been transferred onto it.
Red paint from what?
The red paint was later proven to be a match to the paint on the Bamber's mantle, suggesting that the gun hit the mantle during the struggle that the attacker had with Neville. Jeremy's legal team would later try to argue that the paint was planted there to make him look guilty after the murders.
By his cousins?
Mm-hmm.
Did they stand to gain anything from blaming Jeremy?
Yeah, you are asking all the right questions at the right time. The defense argued that the cousin who found the silencer stood to gain financial reward if Jeremy went to prison. He would be included in the beneficiaries.
Okay, so he was next in line?
Yes, his family. It was June's sister's family, because remember, Neville has no other family.
Right.
The blood type also matched the father of this cousin, who was also in the home when it was discovered. Another person that was in the home when it was discovered was Anne Eaton. She was one of Neville's secretaries, and she would later be allowed to live in the home.
By who?
The estate. They would be next in line.
Okay.
The estate executor was also in the house and did corroborate their story of finding the silencer in the gun cabinet.
He didn't have anything to gain.
No. But
Okay.
he was like, no, I was there. I saw them discover this.
If only the police had done their job to begin with.
Yeah, and had actually searched the whole house. And honestly, would you not thoroughly search a gun case?
Yes, but now the silencer does explain why the twin boys were still asleep.
True. Which to me does help support the thought that the silencer was used.
Yeah.
What the prosecutors argued is that if Sheila used the silencer to kill everyone else, Why would she put the silencer away in the cabinet before killing herself?
Exactly.
They presented the idea that Jeremy shot everyone with the silencer, and then when he placed the gun under his sister's chin to make it look like she had shot herself in the neck, he realized that the gun was too long with the silencer attached to it for her hand to reach the trigger and have the gun rested under her chin. They believed that Jeremy took the silencer off, put it away, and then staged the gun on his sister.
So of her 2 bullet wounds, were they of different sizes? Because I'm thinking if he shot her first with the silencer to incapacitate her, then had to stage a shot so that her fingerprints would be on the gun, those bullet wounds would be different sizes.
They were both close range.
The recoil of an automatic weapon, I'm thinking, is going to push the gun more into your skin. Your hand's going to jerk, and it's not going to change that amount of distance to get a second shot off.
Yeah. And they do determine, which I'll talk about in a minute, that the 2 shots were slightly different in space from her body. In addition to the silencer, there was also a sight for the rifle that was put away. This sight always stayed on the rifle as they used it to hunt. The sight was screwed onto the rifle and had to be removed with a screwdriver. It wasn't easy to take it on or off and had to be reset each time it was put back on. So it was weird that it had been removed. They kind of always left it on that rifle.
But if you're shooting something close up, you don't need a sight on the gun.
Right. Okay, so what about fingerprints? When the rifle was finally fingerprinted, a print from Sheila's right ring finger was found on the right side of the butt, pointing downwards. Jeremy's forefinger print was found on the breech end of the barrel, above the stock and pointing across the gun. But he did admit to handling the gun earlier that day. There were 3 other prints found, but the detail of those prints were insufficient to be identified.
Whose finger was found on the trigger, Christy?
There was no good print taken from the trigger. But remember, the officer had handled the gun without gloves, and it had taken weeks before they actually printed the gun.
Right. Who's grabbing a gun with your ring finger? That's an awkward grab.
That's what I thought. Jeremy's forefinger was on there, but it was her ring finger, which did seem weird to me.
Yeah.
The hair that they found on the silencer was reported as gray, but was somehow lost and never tested. According to court documents, the silencer had been taken to Ann Eaton's house for safekeeping before taken to the police, and that is how the hair was lost. This does make the extended family seem a little suspicious, although June's family did testify in Sheila's defense, saying that she was always kind and loving and had no idea how to use the gun. If they had staged the murder-suicide, they would have tried to vilify Sheila, so I think it was just an honest mistake on their part.
So instead of taking the silencer straight to the police,
they took it home first and then took it into the police, and apparently it still took the police a while to test it. They didn't jump on the evidence right away.
They had already solved it.
They solved it as soon as they got there and believed Jeremy's story. Now the bullets. 25 bullets had been pumped into the Bamber family. The gun only held 10 bullets at a time. This meant that during the attack, the dirtbag murderer would have had to reload the gun at least twice. Some stated that Sheila never used a gun and would have had a hard time doing this. Apparently, this particular magazine was extremely hard to fit in the 10th bullet. The bullets also had an oil on them. I don't know if that's common or not. When tested, Sheila did not have any trace of this oil on her fingers, which seemed impossible if she loaded the gun. Sheila was also found wearing a nightgown without pockets or a place to store extra bullets.
So she's not running around the house, shot one parent, had a struggle, and then
had to run into the kitchen, refill the gun. But if she was using the silencer, maybe they didn't know that the other ones were being shot, and maybe she had time to do that.
But you would have heard the struggle with her dad.
Yep, there's a lot of questions. Every shot was also a potentially fatal shot administered to her family, something that seemed unlikely if she didn't know how to handle a gun. The defense would argue, though, that she didn't have to know how to use a firearm.
From that close of range.
Exactly. Because it was so close, it would be nearly impossible for her to miss her target from those distances. Sheila was tested for lead on her hands, but only had normal amounts, not what you would expect from firing 25 rounds. As far as I could tell, Jeremy was never tested for the oil or gunshot residue at the scene of the crime, which seems crazy to me.
Yeah.
Now let's look at the victims a little more closely and try to piece together more of what happened on the frightful night. At 9:30 p.m., Barbara Wilson, one of the farm secretaries, called the house to talk to Neville. She reported that he was not his cheerful self. It seemed like he was in the middle of an argument. He was abrupt and seemed impatient with her, and he was never like this. At 10 o'clock p.m., June's sister also called the house. She first spoke to Sheila, who she said was quieter than usual, and then spoke with her sister, who seemed to be fine. Jeremy claimed that after his father had called him for help in the wee hours of the morning, and after the line went dead, he tried to call his dad back, but he never answered.
Was there a phone record of that call back to the house?
No, they didn't trace the calls locally in that small town area at the time. Police did have a British telecom operator check the phone line at White House Farm at 4:30 a.m. The phone was off the hook, and all she could hear was a barking dog. So she was able to tap into the line and could hear the dog barking. When police asked Jeremy why his father called him for help and not the police, Jeremy said his dad didn't like to get organizations involved and preferred to keep it all in the family.
Which I can kind of see if your daughter's going off the rails.
Not wanting her to get arrested.
Yep.
Again, while waiting outside the house with Jeremy, he seemed extremely calm for not knowing what had happened to his family inside the house. So much so that he even started talking about cars with the officers.
What?
About how he was going to buy a Porsche.
With his inheritance, because he just shot his family.
Yeah. Can you imagine that being on your mind? You don't know what's happened to your family inside the house. You're standing out there for 4 hours and you're like, yeah, I think I might buy a Porsche.
4 hours is a long time to wait, Christy. Do you not think that you'd be like, go and do something, go and check them out?
But he was just really relaxed and laid back for most of it. He also told police that during the night in question, his family had suggested to Sheila that she should place her children in daytime foster care because they were concerned about her ability to care for them.
But I thought you said they were mostly with their father.
They were mostly with their father, but he's suggesting that they were talking to Sheila about, like, when you have the kids, maybe they should be in daytime foster care.
Okay.
Which I'm thinking, if Jeremy's the murderer, he's trying to put motive into the scenario for why Sheila would have gone off the handle that night.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like he's doing.
At one point, he did become upset and asked to call his girlfriend Julie, who was brought to the scene. Allegedly, when she got there, Jeremy snickered to her that he should have been an actor. Was this true, or was Julie just seeking revenge? Because this is what Julie said. Nobody else heard it.
You've got to hate somebody a lot to frame them for murder.
Yeah.
That goes beyond some dirtbag just making a date with an ex-girlfriend.
Mind you, how many murder cases happen because someone did step out on them?
That's true.
So pinning a murder on them is not as bad as actually murdering them yourself.
Yeah, that's true.
Is it what a regular person who is sane would do? No. And I do have an opinion of this case, but I'm trying to hold it in. It's really hard. Police searched the perimeter and discovered that all of the windows and doors were locked except for one bedroom window on the main floor. So this easily could have been where the person got in and out, if there was an outside person. Police eventually forced their way through the back door and again first discovered Neville laying on the floor. He was slumped over forward on a turned over chair close to the fireplace hearth. Other chairs and stools were also overturned, along with broken dishes and spilled sugar. Blood spots also appeared to be on the floor.
So that's quite a struggle then.
Mm-hmm. And a ceiling light fixture had also been smashed. All of this indicating that a wicked struggle had ensued. Neville had attempted to fight back. And remember, he's 6'4" and a very strong man.
That's been active. Like, he's 61, but he's been an active 61-year-old.
Yeah, he's still an active farmer.
Yeah.
And we all know how hard our farmers work.
Yeah. And so do they give you any indication of, like, was he the first one to die?
Not really.
Okay.
The only thing that they really indicate is that Sheila was the last one to die.
So you said all of the shots were close range.
Yes. I have a theory that we'll get into as how I think it unfolds.
Okay.
An interesting thing that was discovered and is a source of debate is the telephone. The kitchen phone was actually hidden under some magazines. The bedroom telephone had been moved into the kitchen and was off the hook. It wasn't dangling off the wall, but was just set beside the phone cradle. Would you run and grab the bedroom telephone and take it downstairs to the kitchen to call for help, or simply call from the bedroom?
Yeah, that's weird.
There was also a large number of .22 shells set beside the phone. To me, it would seem like the murderer had staged the phone right where he had put his shells. The phone did not have any blood on it. Both sides of the court would try to use this to their advantage. It is important to know that Neville was first shot upstairs, but then was found on the main floor in the kitchen where he died. The defense would say that Neville called his son Jeremy for help and then ran up the stairs, maybe to help his wife. He was shot upstairs and ran back downstairs, fought his attacker, and ultimately died.
Okay.
The prosecution would suggest that he was originally upstairs and ran downstairs to try and get away when his attacker chased him and beat him down before finally administering the last fatal gunshot wounds. They also suggested that the phone was taken off the hook by the attacker to go along with his story, and Jeremy had never actually received a phone call from his father at all.
I'm thinking that you have 3 grown adults that you're trying to shoot, that you want to take the phone off the hook before. If this is a premeditated murder, you'd want to hide the phones and take it off the hook before so that they couldn't call for help.
Exactly. Also, if the line went dead, as Jeremy stated, why wasn't it hung up? If his father had dropped the phone in haste, the call wouldn't automatically be disconnected, and Jeremy should have been able to hear what was happening in the home. And with it being off the hook, it wouldn't have rung when he said he tried to call his dad back. It would have rung busy. This is the 80s, remember? Does that make sense?
They've caught him in a lie.
Because he said the phone was cut off, like his father had hung up, but then they found the phone off the hook.
But that doesn't mean that the phone wasn't hit off the hook after he tried to call back.
True, but it was just set beside the cradle. It wasn't like thrown off the table, or it was just neatly set down, which to me makes it seem like it was staged. In the kitchen, Neville's blood-soaked watch was found under a rug, and a piece of the butt of the rifle had broken off and was on the floor. Neville was wearing his pajamas and had been shot 8 times. 2 shots entered the right side of his head, and 2 shots entered the top of his head. Any of these shots would have incapacitated Neville or killed him immediately. He also had severe injury to his face. There was a wound to his left side of his lip and to the lower left part of his jaw. His jaw was fractured, and his teeth, neck, and larynx were badly damaged, making it impossible for him to speak clearly on the telephone. He also sustained bullet wounds to his left shoulder and a grazing on his arm above the left elbow.
So those ones were when he was running away?
Yes, because he was shot upstairs.
Yep.
So that might have been where he was hit on the shoulder and grazed, and then ran downstairs, a fight ensued, and then ultimately had those 4 bullets into his head.
Right. And did they find those bullets in the house?
Yeah, all the bullets were accounted for.
So where were those bullets found that grazed him? Like, could they tell the trajectory of them, that he was running down the stairs?
In the information that I found, it didn't say.
Okay.
Just that they were all recovered. With all of the victims, some were inside the victims, some were outside the victims. It was hard to differentiate.
But I guess they didn't do a proper investigation, so that evidence was all lost.
It's true. And I don't think that they did, because I had even read that they didn't even really take proper notes. Neville's face was badly bruised, and he had a plethora of other injuries that indicated he was beaten with a blunt object, likely the butt of the gun.
Which made it break.
Right. He also had 3 circular burn marks on his back that may have been caused by the gun barrel. Many people question if Sheila would have had the strength to fight her father in this manner, considering how much larger and stronger he was than her.
Right, but if she was in a psychotic rage...
You never know.
Yeah.
And everyone was in their pajamas, like everyone was going to bed or in bed. And so, like we've said before, there's that element of surprise and disorientation. June, as I mentioned, was found upstairs on the floor of her bedroom. She was near the doorway and was heavily soaked in blood. She had been shot 7 times. It appeared that she was first shot while laying in bed and then got up to try and get away. She was shot once in the forehead and once to the right side of her head. Either of these shots would have been fatal. She was also shot in the right side of the lower part of her neck, the right forearm, twice on the right side of her chest, and to her right knee. So the attacker was obviously standing on that side of her, because it was kind of all on that side.
Which of those wounds happened while she was still laying in bed?
I'm not sure.
And if they're all from close range, you think that if somebody's coming to shoot you, they're going to shoot at your head first, right? Like, that seems like such a sporadic range of gunshots.
My assumption would be probably the lower part of the neck, because that one wasn't fatal, but it would have been trying to do a fatal shot. And then when she got up, that's probably when the right side of her body, her knee, all of that gets shot. And then when she falls down, she would have been shot in the forehead.
That makes sense.
That's how I envisioned it. But I'm no expert. But maybe more of an expert than the police were who investigated this case. June was barefoot and wearing a nightgown. The blood patterns indicated that she had been standing upright when she was shot. My guess is that she was running towards the door because she was on the floor almost to the door, sprawled out. So that to me also says that she was trying to get away.
And her attacker is in her bedroom behind her.
Yes, to the right of her.
Yes. So her attacker had crept into her bedroom while she was sleeping and was behind her.
Or beside her.
Like, it wasn't like they just shot her from the exit door.
Right.
They had put themselves farther away from the exit than she was.
Yes, because they wanted to get up close and personal.
Disturbing.
Mm-hmm. Like I mentioned earlier, the twins were found in their beds. Daniel had received 5 wounds to the back of his head, which appeared to have been fired in an arc and in quick succession. Nicholas had 3 gunshot wounds to his head.
That is so sad.
It really is, and total overkill.
Yeah.
Sheila was also barefoot and wearing a nightgown. This made me question, would you wear your nightgown to murder your entire family?
If you're not in your right mind, you would.
Maybe. She was laying like I described earlier on the bedroom floor, not too far from her mother, with the gun across her chest and the barrel of the gun right underneath her wounds. Her mother's Bible was half on her upper right arm and half on the ground. Sheila had 2 gunshots to her neck in an upward position. Blood on her nightgown suggested that she was also upright when the shots were fired. The lower shot was a fatal shot, but wouldn't have killed her instantly. It was estimated to be administered about 3 inches away from her body. She could have lived a few moments longer to be able to administer a second shot. The higher of the 2 shots would have immediately ended her life and was in contact with her skin when fired.
That was probably the first one with the silencer.
That's my guess.
Yeah. And what was she doing in her parents' bedroom?
It's hard to say, but possibly she had heard her mom get out of the bed and running to the door, she might have screamed. Maybe Sheila came to check on her mom, what was happening.
Right.
And her dad, because her dad would have run out of the room as well.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know if Neville ran up to her or if he was in bed already.
Yes, that's what I think happened.
The rest of Sheila's body was pristine. She hadn't even broken a fingernail. There was no indication by examining her body that she had been involved in a battle with her father. She had no other scratches or bruising anywhere on her body. She did have a little bit of blood on the back of her hand, but her feet were clean. They did not have abrasions from the glass and broken items that were in the kitchen, nor did she have any traces of sugar on her that had been spilt during the struggle with Neville.
And they never checked Jeremy for any abrasions.
Nothing. He was not even looked at as a suspect. Unfortunately, the pathology reports could not decipher if she definitely had been murdered or had taken her own life. Both were possible. It was also noted that Sheila had cannabis in her system days before her death and had taken her antipsychotic medications. Both were found in her system, even though her psychiatrist had testified that she had stopped taking her medications.
But the psychiatrist for the defense
Was her psychiatrist.
Okay.
The vicious manner in which each person was killed suggested overkill on the murderer's part. Some people, including one of Jeremy's friends, suggested that Jeremy likely hired someone to do the killing for him. However, June's bike was found muddy at Jeremy's property. It is believed that he may have taken his mom's bike home with him at some point and then used that bike to go to and from the family's home undetected. The bike ride was only about 15 minutes one way. No one reported seeing Jeremy riding his mother's bike to or from the White House farm.
Well, who's watching at 10 o'clock at night or past 10 o'clock at night?
Would have been past.
That's a lot more inconspicuous than a car that has headlights.
Right. Which would indicate premeditation and forethought.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you thinking so far?
Oh, it's totally Jeremy.
There are so many little details in this case to consider that I cannot possibly mention them all. Was Sheila mentally unstable enough to kill her parents and children before committing suicide? Were the murders carried out by a third party, possibly a hitman? Was Julie a dirtbag ex taking advantage of a tragedy to get back at Jeremy? Or was she a hero who had the courage to come forward and crack the case wide open? Do you think Jeremy slaughtered his entire family for the inheritance? And can this be proven without reasonable doubt?
I guess that it was Jeremy, but I'm not sure he'll get actually charged. I think there's a lot of doubt.
Well, we'll get into the trial. Jeremy's trial lasted 19 days. He was found guilty of all 5 murders.
I'm actually surprised.
Just a year after the murders were committed, on October 18th, 1986. The judge told Jeremy that he was, quote, evil, almost beyond belief. He was given 5 life sentences with a recommendation of serving a minimum of 25 years. On December 15th, 1994, Home Security decided that Jeremy should remain in prison for the remainder of his life. This life tariff means he is no longer eligible for parole. Jeremy has tried desperately to have this decision reversed, but to no avail.
Good.
He has had some well-known appeals, one of which was highly publicized in 2001. During his appeals, he has brought up some compelling arguments to suggest that he is innocent. A lot of these accusations are in regards to how the crime scene was handled, how certain evidence was mishandled or left out altogether. Jeremy has built a huge entourage of people who believe he is innocent. Some highly influential people support him in this endeavor, including an officer who worked the case.
A younger officer or an older officer?
I don't know. He would be older now, either way.
But one of the ones that originally wanted to investigate more, or one of the ones that was out golfing because they thought they had solved the case?
Right.
Which one's supporting him?
I'm not sure.
That would make a big difference, right?
It would.
Because I'm going to support him and say that he isn't guilty to cover up my poor policeman work.
Right. But it wasn't just that officer. There was even a really well-respected crime journalist who totally believes he's innocent. Like, there's some really influential people who are on his side.
I'm curious to find out what kind of things he's saying that prove his innocence. Because right now he's looking pretty guilty.
He is. But there is a lot. And those were the moments when I was reading them that I was like, oh man, like that wasn't included. That, or was that a lie? Like, it's just so hard to tell.
That was like the Patty Roar case.
It's true.
Yeah.
Except I do think Patty Roar has something to do with it.
But on this one, are you really on the fence?
No, I'll talk a little bit more.
Okay.
No, I do think it is Jeremy, but I don't think it's without some iota of doubt.
Yes, I am surprised that he was actually convicted because it sounds like there is some reasonable doubt.
Right. I feel like if the crime scene had been processed properly and he had been taken into custody right away like he should have been, I don't think we'd have any doubt.
Mm-hmm.
In 2005, Jeremy's lawyer stated to the Home Secretary that they had 4 million documents in the case, and 1/4 of those documents were never presented in court or disclosed to the court.
Why not?
It is a rabbit hole to go down that avenue. I would need another entire episode to discuss it, but they're claiming that 1/4 of the evidence was never even presented. Jeremy's extended family all believe that he is the one responsible for the annihilation of his family. They were outraged when he offered a $1 million reward to anyone who could come forward with evidence to clear his name. He also attempted to take his family to court to claim over $1 million he felt he was entitled to from his grandmother's will.
So he could pay the $1 million for somebody to get him off.
True, he probably is right. He also tried to sue his family for his share of the campground that he owned with his parents. He lost both of these suits.
Yeah, no kidding. You can't profit from your crimes.
No, or profit after, I guess.
Yeah.
But again, this to me speaks of his greed, which would speak to his motive.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy's cousin, Ann Eaton, who testified against him, currently resides in White House Farm. Jeremy's ex-girlfriend, Julie, eventually moved to Canada, and I won't say where, but she reportedly is happily married and is a school teacher. From prison, Jeremy continues to fight and plead his innocence. The most recent action I could find was from just last year. On March 10th, 2021, a new application was submitted with the criminal CCRC for a referral to the Court of Appeal. Just this month, Jeremy's team has submitted 10 new items of evidence that will cast doubt on his conviction. Allegedly, they pertain to the burns on Neville's back, not actually being caused by a rifle. In prison, Jeremy was attacked in 2004 by a fellow inmate while he was talking on the phone. He was stabbed and required 20 stitches. He also attacked a fellow inmate with a broken bottle and got into trouble for calling into a radio station to express his innocence. So he's not had a clean prison record.
No. What do they think the burn marks on Neville's back were from?
I'm not sure.
How does that prove anything?
They said they had 10 new pieces of evidence. And I'm thinking, how are you finding new evidence this far down the road?
When nothing has been properly preserved the whole time.
Never. We're touching the murder weapon with our bare hands, people. Yeah, I don't know. As far as I could tell, Jeremy is currently confined at HM Prison Wakefield. He has worked as a peer partner, helping other inmates read and write. He has transcribed books while in prison into Braille and has even won several awards for doing this.
At least he's doing something good with his life.
That must be a thing that he learned while in prison. He has been able to study sociology and media studies. He gets a daily badminton lesson and actively draws pictures of supermodels that he has sold through an outside agent.
Huh, that's quite the lifestyle for him.
I know. Jeremy was given compensation twice while incarcerated. Once for having his Game Boy stolen, and once after sustaining whiplash during a prison transfer. Still an attractive man, Jeremy has had 3 relationships in prison.
This just always blows my mind.
Me too. And to make that even blow your mind more, one of these relationships allegedly was with a police trainee.
No way.
Mm-hmm. He claims that he receives on average 50 letters a week from women admirers.
I guess even dirtbags need love.
It's a real thing. It's always surprising to me, though.
Shocking.
A TV series has been released about this case in the UK titled White House Farm. It was released in 2020, and I hope I can figure out how to watch it in Canada. I really want to see it. I've heard it's good. Any of our UK listeners, let us know if you've seen it and if you think it's a true portrayal. I plan to keep you all informed of any updates that I discover about this case, as it seems that Jeremy will never stop fighting for his release. However, before I end, regardless if you think Jeremy is guilty or not, I will leave you with one last quote from the judge who gave Jeremy his sentence. He said, quote, "I find it difficult to foresee whether it will ever be safe to release someone who can shoot 2 little boys as they lie asleep in their beds."
Yeah, that's just awful.
That's so cold-blooded.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the scandalous case of a man who spent the last 37 years behind bars for the brutal and vicious massacre of his entire family, the arrogant and greedy dirtbag, Jeremy Bamber.
Who is an awful, greedy, selfish dirtbag.
Yeah, I totally think he did it.
Yeah.
But there were times, like if you go onto he has a whole website and a forum, and if you go on there and start reading it, if those things are true, you're like, oh man, he might be innocent.
Yeah, but there are so many people that can sell so many things. Like, look at the whole conspiracy group that follows around and says Sandy Hook never happened.
That's true.
Right? Like, you can convince people of a lot of strange, different things and get a following for almost anything.
Yeah.
That doesn't change the fact that
that's true.
He's a guilty dirtbag.
Yeah, because that is outrageous that people even think that.
Yeah.
And he is a manipulator. So I don't know. But he does have this huge following of people that are trying to help him be freed.
But it sounds like he's also received schooling to do just that. He attended media studies and sociology.
True. I never even made that connection.
Like, that's just priming him to manipulate the public and the media into believing his story.
To the point where he even got in trouble for calling a radio station when he wasn't allowed to.
Yeah.
Yeah, just trying to plead his case to whoever will listen.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like he's always been selfish his whole life.
Oh, absolutely.
But I am curious if there are any of our listeners that think otherwise.
Yeah, if anyone thinks that Sheila actually did murder her children and family and then committed suicide, let us know. And let us know why you think that.
It's always fascinating to hear somebody else's views on it.
It's true. But before I ramble on even more, because I could obviously talk about this a lot, do go to our Facebook page and let us know.
We would love to chat with you there.
But until then, we hope you have a wonderful week.
See ya.
Bye.
There's our stupid truck.
Yep.
Did you like it? The winter has not taken away the trucks.
Why do we live in a place where the air hurts our face?
Weren't we just in the UK for one of my cases?
Were we?
Yes.
Okay, scratch all that. Okay, it's been a while since I took us to the UK. Okay, let me figure out a new way to say this. Okay.
I'm pretty sure I just did yeah. My Harry Dillon one.
I thought that was Canada.
No, that was UK.
Oh.
Did
Did I hear that?
Yes. He guarded the royal family in Scotland?
Oh, yeah.
Lancashire? Remember all those words we had to learn?
Okay, I'm dumb. It's been a stressful week, you guys. Okay, sorry. I didn't even know where you were going with that. I'm just like, I don't know. That wasn't part of my research. And New Zealand for Jeremy.
Was she the one that he bought the was he no.
Instead, they published the news that Jeremy I can't say his name.
Jeremy.
He always first cleaned and then
That is how we feel today, listeners.
That is. My mouth and brain are not cooperating.
I'm having a hard time believing anybody but Jeremy.
Jeremy.
But dirtbag Jeremy.
He's just a germ of a man. Do you ever say a word and then it's just like weird to you?
Yeah, have you recorded with me before? And you're like, that sounded fine. And I'm like, no, I don't think so.
Or you're like, did I say that right? No.
Another Sound Off Media Company podcast.